30 years of the PlayStation. It really is incredible to believe that this groundbreaking games console has been around for so long, that set new foundations within the video game industry, while still being a massive and influential talking point even to the current day. But to understand the broad impact of the PlayStation, we need to go way back to quite possibly the greatest era in video game history. The 90s was an interesting time in global history, as it brought about many rising trends from cars to fashion, movies and music, reaching huge success that brought us the likes of Oasis, Blur, Nirvana and yes, the Spice Girls, among many other coveted groups that would go down in history as some of the best ever. Among the popularity of these genres, we would also witness the evolution of the video game industry, which would see a massive shift in how games would be developed, along with a huge boom in popularity in arcades and home console sales. Almost every major high street shopping centre and retail outlet would have a prominent video game store that would become the forefront of many childhood fantasies and addictions, with games and consoles reaching an all-time high. This was also one of the greatest generations, seeing friends gather together at the weekends to chill and play their favourite games, where fun and creative endeavours could flourish, where your imagination could take you into unique worlds to explore and allow you to be part of the action, a scenario rarely seen in today's world. The 90s is fondly remembered for all its trending aspects, as it was also the first generation that brought us the Sony PlayStation, releasing in 1994, originally in Japan, after a failed working partnership with Nintendo that would set the world alight with its revolutionary graphics, game concepts and wacky advertisement campaigns that was leaps and bounds ahead of anything else seen at the time. There was great hype leading up to the launch of the PlayStation, but many of us were still used to playing games on early 8 and 16-bit consoles and would be unfamiliar with the newer features of these systems that would be hitting the front shelves of gaming stores, but still there was a unique aura around the launch of the console which stood out among its peers. The PlayStation quickly gained in popularity and sales, along with the interesting selection of titles that would be available from day one, with arcade ports of fighting and racing games providing something for all players. It was just a different time that strayed away from the norms of society, as the PlayStation and video games had now become an important part of everyday life. The console played a pivotal role in societal influences, with how players would interact and consume content during this period, along with being at the forefront of many popular social scenes, events worldwide, with games like Wipeout influencing the dance, rave, techno club culture, seeing the rise of popular music artists and DJs itching to collaborate with game studios to have their sound heard and spread to massive audiences. Having your sound and name printed on the cover of video games was an honour and a privilege that could skyrocket an artist's music career. The PlayStation is not just a legendary console, it is quite possibly the most revolutionary system in existence that single-handedly created the new evolution within the video games industry. The impact of the PlayStation can be felt far and wide, from its unusual history that rose from the ashes of Nintendo's failed partnership, thinking Sony had no skin in the game, but would become the turning point that would work out in Sony's favour, leading up to the console's launch, which exceeded all expectations with its looks, design, and the many great games it came packaged with during its launch period, with arcade ports of classics like Ridge Racer, Tekken, Battle Arena Toshinden, and many other games depending on the region you were in, with NBA Jam Tournament Edition, Total Eclipse Turbo, ESPN Extreme Games, Neketsu Oyako, a Final Fight, Streets of Rage clone in Japan, among many others, providing an impressive lineup to appeal to a wide variety of players to suit their interests. Having the backing of well-known third-party developers with Namco and Psygnosis greatly helped during the early weeks and months of the console's launch, as the high-quality arcade ports of games like Ridge Racer and Tekken showcased what the PlayStation was capable of and the types of players it was aiming towards. Everything about the console, from the design, controllers, peripherals and games being developed, felt more grown up compared to consoles and gaming systems of the past. It just felt more refined and fitted into the concept of what consumers were looking for, as no longer were games solely aimed at kids or younger audiences. Now older and more mature generations could get involved in the action, as the variety of games being developed presented different themes that could appeal to a variety of different interests of players far and wide. It literally changed the game, as very few gaming consoles have left such a lasting impact and appeal as much as the original PlayStation. And while it has had many successors in later generations, with the PlayStation 2 holding the record as the highest selling games console ever, but it is the first console that really set the foundations for the evolution of the new 3D era of video games during the 90s, which is hard to believe that this legendary console is now 30 years old, which is absolutely insane. The years, consoles and many games that have followed have just flown by, and it feels like it was only yesterday that we were experiencing experiencing this new era of gaming that literally would change everything and the way and how we would play and interact with games. The presence of this great console can still be felt across the world of gaming to this day, with players taking more of an interest in the many games that were released during its 11-year lifespan across all regions, with many classic collectors adding games to their ever-growing collections, proving as a future investment as the prices are creeping up all of the time. This generation would also see the introduction of the PlayStation, PC and Sega Saturn magazine demo CDs, allowing consumers to play and watch previews of upcoming or popular games, which would prove to be a huge selling point, mainly with the PlayStation, as it had a larger games library available, as not everybody at the time could afford to purchase the latest games, so the demo CDs were the more affordable and perfect alternative to play and test games they were interested in. The demos provided a lot of variety, allowing you to spend many hours enjoying the unique features they had to offer, with some games having more features and levels to explore than others to prolong the experience, with others having access to multiplayer support to play short versions of fighting or sports games to enjoy with your friends and family. In all honesty, there was so much variety that most gamers got as much fun and enjoyment out of the demo discs themselves as we did with the full games, with loads of epic experiences to be had. There was so much diversity during this era that would always provide gamers with something interesting to play. While the PlayStation was the preferred console by many during this time, I do want to mention the Sega Saturn, which at the time was the main competitor to the PlayStation, that also had some epic games, but due to bad decisions and poor marketing efforts from Sega, would lead to a lack of support, which would hinder the console from truly shining and reaching its full potential. Because make no mistake, the Sega Saturn itself is an impressive console that produced many incredible titles during its time, and is definitely the perfect alternative to the PlayStation in many ways. And if you enjoy all the classic low poly blockiness of the many games that saw a release on the console, along with many incredible 2D games and arcade ports which are still considered to be among the best of their kind even to this day, then you should at least give it a try. Mind you, if you can get access to games over a console at a good price, as it is a rarity these days, as like the PlayStation, many gamers are now beginning to understand and respect these older consoles, which are driving prices up to unobtainable levels or limits for many, so emulation might be our best option to explore the many great games of the system. When we do look back, the fall of the Sega Saturn worked greatly in the PlayStation's favour, leaving the console to have little to no competition during this era, which only heightened its overall success. Even the launch of the Nintendo 64 in 1996 would have little impact on the growing success of the PlayStation, as so many great games and series were being born as a result of developers preferring to create games for Sony's platform due to the wealth of support available. The Nintendo 64, like the Saturn, would also produce some of the greatest gaming experiences in existence, with many of the early titles providing the foundations for future projects to reach great heights of success also. Like the Sega Saturn, the Nintendo 64 also proved its worth with its unique library of games, with genre-defining titles like Super Mario 64, GoldenEye, and The Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time, that would create the standard blueprint for almost all games of their kind to follow, that we would see moving forward from that point on. But even with all of these innovative elements, nothing could catch the PlayStation due to Sony dominating the market with their innovative promotional techniques, seeing PS1 consoles be at the forefront of every gaming shelf as soon as you would walk into any game store. From the PlayStation's launch in 1994, Sony had the backing of third-party support from large brands with Namco, Capcom, Naughty Dog, Psygnosis and Konami, among other companies from Japan, that aided in transitioning many near-perfect arcade ports of icons with Ridge Racer and Tekken, setting new standards for future games to follow. Games were easier to develop and produce for the console, and with the support of housing game data on compact discs or CDs rather than cartridges, would prove to be a better option in the long run. The PlayStation also had some of the most memorable visual designs on the discs, with it being one of the first consoles to have its own distinguishable backing colour, with the discs being in black, to let everyone know that it was a PlayStation game to avoid confusion. As let's face it, back then it would usually be our parents that would often buy the games we played either as a gift or for Christmas as a present, and many of them couldn't tell the difference between games or consoles, so these subtle design changes to the discs would aid in avoiding confusion when purchasing. From my own perspective, I consider this generation to be the greatest in gaming, as it presented a unique appeal that was different, not just in how it made you feel as a gamer or consumer, but in the way it changed the landscape of how the world perceived video games as a medium for entertainment, as it was no longer viewed upon as a concept that was solely only for kids, but now it became an avenue for older generations to enjoy playing games. As yes, there were still games like your favourite platformers and sports games available, but you also had access to more grown-up themed entries, with titles like Resident Evil, Parasite Eve, Overblood, Silent Hill, Final Fantasy VII, Alundra, among a massive catalogue of incredible games that would create new genres and fan chance to get involved in the action. The PlayStation would also play an influential role in the clubbing scene during the early years of its release, with many games housing iconic music themes and soundtracks from legendary DJs and designers that would also inspire a futuristic theme around the console, stating that the PlayStation is the future. So many games were developed under this theme that it was impossible not to notice the impact they were having on the youth of this generation. Many of these soundtracks would be played by DJs during mix sessions in clubs, as they reflected the culture of nightclubs and parties during this generation, where you could often witness gameplay on TVs to play alongside the music tracks being played, which added an aura and an ambience of each venue. Another interesting and appealing aspect of the PlayStation would be the addition of allowing you to use the console as an audio disc player, similar to that of a hi-fi system, to listen to your favourite music CDs and albums when not playing games. Also, many of the game discs gave access to the game's soundtracks to play in various CD players. An example of this would be the Wipeout games and Grand Theft Auto, where you could pop in the game disc into a standard CD player and play your favourite tracks from the game. This added more levels of interactivity not seen before, which only heightened the appeal of the PlayStation during its lifespan. The appeal of the console's popularity was reaching far and wide, with media companies creating dedicated gaming magazines solely to cover all of the interesting aspects of the PlayStation, from its massive lineup of games to its impressive list of unusual and quirky accessories, which provided more interactive ways to play. There was nothing more exciting than walking around to your local newsagents to view the latest game magazines, looking for information about upcoming games that would get you all excited, and then spending weeks or months saving your pocket money to eventually go out for a day of shopping to buy the latest popular game or multiple games and get home just to play them. It was sheer bliss. For the PlayStation, it was the perfect console to be released at the right time due to these reasons, as it came during a transition from the days of playing 2D games and early renditions of 3D iterations to fully rendered texture concepts that stood out by a mile among everything else seen at the time. It presented a feeling of intrigue, curiosity and excitement, as we truly did not fully understand what we were witnessing and did not know what to expect, as it was so different from what came before it. No other console in history has ever documented such a shift in perception in how we as consumers interact with the games that we play. The PlayStation era presented many interesting concepts that led to developers taking liberties through experimenting with different ideas, many of which proving to be successful, while giving birth to new, popular brands and iconic characters that would become staples within the games industry, while helping to change the perspectives of many genres to evolve and adapt with the latest and current trends of the time. One of these interesting characters would arrive with Crash Bandicoot, with the first game in the series releasing a few months after the PlayStation's release in Europe and North America, becoming a household name and a brand mascot for Sony. The many futuristic themed games developed during this time all took full advantage of these experiments to great effect, as without them we may not have had the privilege to witness gaming icons with Wipeout, Twisted Metal, Roll Cage, Jet Moto, even as far as other game types within other genres with No Fear downhill mountain biking, Vagrant Story, Chrono Cross, Parasite Eve, Kudelka, the Resident Evil series, Tomb Raider among others. Honestly, there are just so many games that implement these qualities that we could be here all day, but that wouldn't be a bad thing, as there are plenty of games to choose from, with one of the largest title catalogues of any console in history that really has a game for everyone to enjoy. We briefly touched upon the demo discs of the PlayStation, which during this generation provided great marketing methods, outlets and opportunities, with different ways to try, test and play favourite and upcoming games that saw both the PlayStation, Sega Saturn along with the PC begin adding playable interactive sampler demo discs with gaming magazines as a means for developers to further promote sales and awareness of their games. The games on these demos would range from single to multi-level experiences, along with video previews of games currently in development, along with some multiplayer features allowing for specific games to be played using additional controllers with friends. The demos provided many outlets, as they could expose players to games they had never played or heard of. Many of the games did range in quality however, but they helped significantly in purchasing decisions when looking to buy more games or to add to our ever-growing collections. In many instances there was as much fun to be had just with playing the demos alone without the need to buy the full game, as they were just so much fun to play. In the early months of the PlayStation, magazines would see up to 4 or 5 games being added to demo discs that would range from a variety of playable games to video previews, usually known as rolling demos, but these numbers would gradually increase in the years that followed, as many games would be developed in shorter time frames once developers became more familiar with the design aspects of the console's programming and development cycles. For most of us being introduced to these consoles, the demo discs were often the first interaction we could have had, and having transitioned from playing games on earlier 8 and 16-bit consoles was something to behold. From the first experiences of games on demo CDs DVDs that housed many epic titles, from both the magazines and the discs that came bundled with the console, that saw you play games like Destruction Derby, Loaded, Jumping Flash, Nova Storm, Formula 1, Wipeout 2097, Monster Trucks, among many others, was simply mind-blowing at the time. There were so many great games added during the PlayStation's launch, with newer titles and sequels being added in the months that followed, only solidifying the inevitable growth of the console to quickly become the definitive system to own during this period. With the PlayStation later launching in the US and Europe in 1995, only heightened the console's success with the great quality arcade ports and individual titles that would become household names in video games over the future months and years to come. And yet again, the demo discs played a vital role in the console's massive success, as they were the perfect alternative to play these games, and for those who couldn't afford to purchase them without ever needing to buy full price editions. Cinematic sequences and movie quality aesthetics were all of the rage during this time, and both the PlayStation and Saturn played their part in bringing these experiences to home TV screens, and the demos also played a role in demonstrating these visual elements to the masses and provided the perfect outlet to distribute many samples of these experiences that are just as important as the console itself. The demos simply were an awesome addition to our gaming experiences growing up on the PlayStation, and I'm sure you can agree. There was nothing more exciting than saving up your pocket money each month to buy the latest edition of your favourite PlayStation magazine, just to get the chance to try some of the new upcoming games that you were interested in. There was nothing else like it, and sadly it is an aspect that has disappeared in the last few years, with most, if not all, gaming elements becoming fully digital, which removes the need to print or process magazines or demo discs, as they seemingly are no longer in demand, which is a shame, as this presented one of the greatest aspects of playing video games during this generation. The PlayStation brought us some of the greatest experiences while introducing us to some of the most influential and iconic titles in the gaming realm. Many of them would build upon the foundations of previous console generations, but one area would be more noticeable with the evolution of the survival horror genre that would be born off of the overwhelming success of Capcom's Resident Evil, releasing in early 1996, that completely changed the landscape of horror games moving forward, as it presented innovative experiences never seen before. But the PlayStation would get its first taste of classic survival horror experience, originally with the Alone in the Dark sequel, Jack is Back, in late 1995, and from there it wouldn't take long before the floodgates would open into the world of horror on gaming consoles that instantly changed how we would experience tension, fear, jump scares and atmosphere in ways we could never imagine. The release of Capcom's Resident Evil in March of 1986 was heavily influenced by games like the original Alone in the Dark and Dr. Hauser, being released previously on the PC and Panasonic 3DO systems that played a pivotal role in the future success of the horror genre. At the time, very little was known about the upcoming release of Resident Evil, but little did Sony and Capcom know that this game would single-handedly change the gaming landscape from that point on to create the survival horror genre that would become a staple in the evolution of the industry even to this very day. With the game releasing first on the PlayStation, it ideally was the best move, as the console was quickly gaining in popularity, and with the multitude of groundbreaking and innovative titles already on display, it only added to the massive lineup and impressive appeal already available. These games also aided in the transition of video games being more approachable for older, more mature audiences, as consoles were no longer bound to being considered only for kids, but gamers young and old could find something to suit their own preferences. Many other horror games and sequels would follow in the wake of Resident Evil's growing success, with many of them utilising elements from different genres to present even more in-depth and engaging experiences. If we look at the Parasite Eve series, Overblood, Kudalka, Fear Effect, Nightmare Creatures, Evil Dead Hail to the King, Dino Crisis, among many other titles, also leading to two of the scariest games ever on the console with both Hell Knight and Silent Hill. There would also be a lot of similar games to both Silent Hill and Hell Knight that would also try to replicate the aura in which surrounded them, with the likes of Iru, D, Rikoku, The Note, Gege no Kitaro, Tecmo's Deception, Shadow Tower, Germs, along with the Echo Knight and Kingsfield series, some of them being amongst the earliest games seen on the console, but would all be original concepts of what we would now see as first-person psychological horror, as today's market is now flooded with interesting titles that have taken inspiration from these early games in some shape or form. If you want to know more about these genre-defining horror experiences, I will leave a link to a previous video here on screen and below in the description that dives into the history of the many horror games that graced the PlayStation console. The PlayStation during its early months would also witness a surge in the racing game genre that would see ports of popular arcade entries along with many experimental concepts, some of which would become a massive influence on the social scene, with Wipeout providing heart-pounding techno and rave soundtracks from icons in the industry with the Chemical Brothers, Orbital and Cold Storage among others, along with the visual themes developed by the creative minds of the Designers Republic, with these concepts being brought forward to build around the entire theme of the PlayStation itself. The arcade port of Ridge Racer from Namco would also play an essential role in the early success of the console, being seen as a solid alternative to the original game, giving players a near-perfect arcade experience from their own living room, with an incredible fast-paced soundtrack that, like Wipeout, would bring the sound of PlayStation to the ears and eyes of the world. The huge success of Ridge Racer helped sell many console packages in its early months, so it would be no surprise to witness future sequels to also find their way to the console, with Ridge Racer Revolution releasing only a few months after the launch of the console, as it had been developed before the launch of the PlayStation, as the first game would be a port of the arcade original and Ridge Racer Revolution would be a console exclusive. Around that time, Namco would also release another sequel in the series, releasing in the arcades, with Rave Racer, expanding on the gameplay elements of Ridge Racer with more cars, courses and new music tracks. The success of Ridge Racer would also see sequels with Rage Racer and Ridge Racer Type 4 being released in the years that followed, with the latter being among the PlayStation's finest experiences and some of the greatest racing games of all time. Ridge Racer wouldn't be the only successful racing game to see seen on the PlayStation, as over the months and years that followed, we would witness truly fantastic titles with the likes of the V-Rally series, Micro Machines V3, Destruction Derby 1 and 2, but as mentioned earlier, the Wipeout series would become a powerhouse that not only influenced the evolving theme of the PlayStation, but that of the social party and nightclub scene. It became the perfect blend of futuristic ideologies and visual concepts, with epic soundtracks that greatly inspired the transition of gaming and development as a medium within society itself. It was simply mesmerising to witness such a display of speed and detail, all while listening to pulse-pounding techno beats from your favourite artists, spiking adrenaline levels to an all-time high. The Wipeout games weren't the only entries to provide doses of dopamine, as games like Destruction Derby 1 and 2, along with Formula 1, presented heart-pounding scenarios and crashes along with hyper-realistic sound and visual design that could replicate real-life events, which was a surreal rush beyond anything else seen at the time. I'll never forget one of the first demos I ever played on the PlayStation, with a playable version of Formula 1 being able to take part in a 3-lap race in the Nürburgring, which presented some of the most ultra-realistic visuals and sound effects for its time that made you feel that you were just watching a live race on a Sunday afternoon on TV, which I did a lot as a kid, that felt so authentic to the real thing that my mind could not believe what I was seeing. It was on another level entirely. V-Rally was released on the PlayStation during the summer months of 1997 and would be considered as the console's answer to the iconic Sega Rally that had been dominating the arcade scene and would later be also extremely popular on the Sega Saturn console of the time. While it had more content available with cars, tracks and game modes than Sega Rally, V-Rally felt somewhat behind regarding gameplay mechanics and control features to not be as easily accessible or user-friendly compared to Sega's outing, but it still proved to be a solid experience and a popular seller on the PlayStation during that year, along with Porsche Challenge, being seen as some of the best racing games on the console of the time that paved the way for more games to follow. Then, in late 1997, early 1998, would see the introduction of a game that would become the greatest selling title on the PlayStation, with Gran Turismo setting the gaming world alight with its hyper-realistic visuals that were beyond anything else seen ever at the time, that pushed the graphical capabilities of the console to its limit. Gran Turismo was so successful that it also inspired sales of the many legendary Japanese sports cars licensed within the game that we are so familiar with today, from the Subaru Impreza, Mitsubishi Lancer Evo, Mitsubishi FTO, GTO, Toyota Supra, Celica GT4, the Toyota Chaser, the Nissan Skyline, Nissan S13 and S14 Silvia, the Honda Civic, Integra, to the Mazda RX-7, among a huge list of other cars that would see prices skyrocket in value to the current day, with many of these cars now becoming unobtainable as prices are now rivaling that of exotic hypercars, which is just insane. Gran Turismo played a massive role in this crazy turn of events, which spawned many sequels and imitators, bringing about the rise of hyper-realistic simulation racing. The sequels, while being great games with ultra-realistic visuals seen on modern systems, may have lost their appeal in recent times, despite still selling in high numbers, but just don't have the same impact as the original games from both the PlayStation 1 and PS2 eras. Still, for many of us growing up, playing Gran Turismo was the ideal way to educate ourselves in the world of car culture, knowing and learning about engine types, gear ratios, tyre compounds, turns, what settings are best suited to specific or certain race conditions, to engine upgrades for more power, and getting a general feel for the driving experience of every car you would use in the game was something we will never forget. Plus, you cannot forget about the many epic soundtracks that accompanied each race to ramp up the adrenaline to another level, which was insane. It was pure emotion-filled fun. They gave you the driving experience within your living room, and if you had the luxury of owning one of the many steering wheel peripherals like the Mad Cat setup, including the pedals, you could have some of the best driving experiences in a video game for its time. Many of these steering wheel controllers also worked for other racing games on the PlayStation, even older titles with Destruction Derby 2 and Ridge Racer, which provide more ways to experience these classic titles that was so much fun. Simply put it, these games fueled the love and desire to get involved in the car and automotive scene, with Gran Turismo still often being mentioned as the main inspiration behind the explosion of racing and car culture today. Later in 1998, we would also see the evolution of the rally genre in a whole new light with the release of Colin McRae Rally, which would change the way of how rally games would be presented moving forward, as the game broke new grounds and set standards very like Gran Turismo that changed the face of the racing genre in its entirety. Again, the steering wheel setup would work perfectly as you would drift and slide around hairpins and sharp corners, where you could push your driving skills to the absolute limit. There were just so many interesting ways to experience these games. It was just cool to own a PlayStation at the time. This year is often regarded as one of the best in the video games industry, as so many epic titles made headlines, with many of them becoming icons in the industry, setting standards for all that aimed to follow. With Gran Turismo being a massive success, it would inspire developers from Japan to create some impressive titles that would focus on racing using iconic JDM classics, with anything from the Nissan Skylines to the Subaru Impreza, Mitsubishi Lancer Evo, FTO, GTO, Toyota Chaser, Supra, Celica, with the option tuning car and Toge Max series, among others, also adding more experiences to the PlayStation's impressive lineup. Let's just say that they presented a massive list of cars that introduced avid enthusiasts to the car market, but unfortunately these games didn't see a release outside of the region, which led to the only way to play them being to import copies to play on modified consoles or through emulation in modern times. But at least now we can experience them in all their glory, with the majority of them being way better than we expected. Honestly, many of the cars I personally have owned and experiences witnessed over recent times have been mainly inspired due to playing these games growing up, so that will give you a glimpse of how these games can inspire you to take action around the passions in your life. I personally have always been obsessed with cars, and these games only fuel that passion even further over the years. The PlayStation will continue to produce more interesting racing games moving forward, along with the inevitable sequel of Gran Turismo 2, expanding on the original in almost every way, with more cars and tracks from all your favourite brands and manufacturers. There was so much variety on the console that there was literally a racing game for every type of player. Now, this is where things get really interesting with the PlayStation, as few know that the console is also home to one of the largest catalogues of RPG games in existence, ranging from classic JRPG style gameplay to a mix of genre types combining elements of horror, racing and combat, with these elements presenting more innovative and interesting ways to play games. King's Field would be one of the first ever RPG adventures, along with being one of the original launch titles when the console first released in Japan in 1994, playing in the form of a first-person dungeon crawler. This game series would become the inspiration behind what is now known as the Souls type genre, with gameplay being extremely difficult, displaying instant death mechanics forcing you to play the game from the beginning, each time losing all your items and progression along the way. Not for casual gamers, but will appeal to more skillful and seasoned players who enjoy a challenge. Still, this genre will present many more offerings that will appeal to a wider audience, with many of them reaching legendary status, with games like Final Fantasy VII, the Sudoku series, Breath of Fire 3 and Wild Arms, with more action-based RPG outings like Alundra, and even more interesting titles that only saw release over in Japan. The list is incredible regarding these games, that the console is still considered as the best avenue to find and play new RPG experiences to the current day, as there are so many interesting titles that we still don't know anything about. While many RPGs, especially from Japan, use the native language, fans have been hard at work over the years to create translations for many of these games, to make them more appealing and approachable for players desperate desperately wanting to experience everything on offer, which shows the dedication and the lengths that fans are willing to go to, just to gain the best possible experiences from their favourite games. Arguably the greatest RPGs on the PlayStation stand in the form of Final Fantasy VII, 8 and 9, along with Chrono Cross and Chrono Trigger, that inspired an entire gaming genre to become more involved with the nuances and intricacies of these games. At the time when Final Fantasy VII was released on the PlayStation, it was a big deal, as the series previously had been exclusive to Nintendo, but seeing the vast potential on offer with the consoles, Squaresoft, now Square Enix, knew that they would be better capitalising on these opportunities, and it worked, as the Final Fantasy series became a staple of the PlayStation's future success from that point on, breaking records with sales that would lead to more of the developer's legendary titles being added to the console's ever-growing RPG catalogue. Final Fantasy VII would also be the game to really introduce Western audiences to the unique appeal of RPG games, as before this, these games were often overlooked, but it was impossible to ignore the appeal of the game, as it would also be among the most promoted games ever on the PlayStation, with advertisements regularly being displayed all across magazine articles and TV promo slots for its time, that would also present some of the most visually stunning experiences seen in a video game. The wide variety of RPG games on the PlayStation provides different scenarios for how players can interact within the worlds we find ourselves in, as they allow us to become involved with their interesting stories while witnessing the action unfold before our very eyes. This became an interesting period as these games produced new, intriguing and curiosity-driven ways to engage our imagination through vivid storytelling and unique, unforgettable plots. The visual detail on display throughout the worlds and environments you will explore are on another level, and they don't look out of place even in today's modern, hyper-realistic world of video games. Many of the greatest RPG games on the PlayStation managed to expand their reach far and wide to other platforms, with others that are still only playable on the console to the current day. It did take a while for most players to fully adapt and accept these unique playstyles, especially among Western audiences, as RPG games were among the most popular genres seen in Japan, but over the years, we have gradually begun to appreciate the interesting aspects of these games, as they provide many ways to play, and with the multitude of experimental games and genre crossovers blending many elements with horror, action and even racing, they provide a unique and unmatched experience that you can really only find on the PlayStation itself. Games like Kudalka, the Parasite Eve series, and even with games such as Racing Lagoon highlight these blends in great detail, while proving that these ideas can appeal to a mixture of gaming audiences. Seriously, if you want to find great and memorable RPG experiences, then look no further than the original PlayStation. While the genres mentioned set the stage for the PlayStation to become the dominant platform to play games in the 90s, there would be a wide variety of innovation through other popular game genres, from puzzle, platforming and simulation, that would also steal the show, even bringing the world of sports to the forefront, with the PlayStation also being coming home to the first ever full home console 3D football game with Actua Soccer, having been developed by Gremlin Interactive, that would also aid in spawning the Actua Sports series, that would include other sports entries with golf, tennis and ice hockey, again setting the blueprint for other developers to take inspiration, from which wouldn't take long, as companies like EA, Electronic Arts and Konami also adapting their popular FIFA and ISS football series to implement 3D elements into their games moving forward. This would also prove to be the best possible move, as yes, like Actua Soccer, early sports entries had their limitations and flaws, but with each new iteration and sequel gradually saw more progressive improvements to eventually present almost lifelike experiences with dev teams making use of full motion capture technology, create real life movement for character and player abilities for more true to life experiences. The experimental qualities in games being developed on the PlayStation and other consoles of the time set the tone for the future of video games creation. Gremlin would later be acquired by Infogrames, which would quickly phase out the Actua series, leaving the FIFA and ISIS Pro series to become the definitive football games to play, as they became more polished and refined compared to earlier examples, with both going head to head for the best football experience up until the last few years. So many great sports titles would find a home on the PlayStation, leaving a lasting impact on fans over its lifespan, which would only continue in popularity with the PlayStation 2 in the early 2000s. The mid-90s was a transformative era for the video games industry, heralding the birth of the 3D platformer, with many finding a home on the Sony PlayStation. This period was marked by rapid innovation, with sole developers transcending the limitations of 2D gaming, embracing the third dimension to create immersive, puzzle-filled adventures. The leap to 3D not only redefined gameplay mechanics, but also introduced a cast of iconic characters that would leave an indelible mark on the hearts of gamers. At the forefront of this revolution was Naughty Dog's Crash Bandicoot, released in 1996. Crash, with his quirky charm and adventurous spirit, quickly became the mascot for the PlayStation. The game's lush, vibrant environments, coupled with challenging levels and engaging puzzles, set new standards for platformers. Players guided Crash through perilous jungles, dangerous temples and treacherous islands, all while collecting various items while trying to thwart the evil plans of Dr. Neo Cortex. The success of Crash Bandicoot wasn't just in its gameplay, it was in the personality and depth of the 3D world that it brought to life. Around this time, Nintendo would present what is often seen as the greatest 3D platformer to ever exist, with Super Mario 64, taking the iconic character through vast worlds and beautifully crafted environments, creating a blueprint in which all platformers would follow from that point on. This would also inspire Insomniac Games, that would later release Spyro the Dragon in 1998, seeing the feisty purple dragon offer a fresh take on the genre, with his ability to glide, charge and breathe fire. The game's expansive worlds were filled with hidden treasures, endearing characters and a myriad of challenges. Spyro's quest to free his fellow dragons from the clutches of an evil villain captivated players, offering a blend of exploration and platforming that was both accessible and deeply satisfying, making the game fun and approachable for all players of all ages. The seamless integration of colourful graphics and an enchanting soundtrack further solidified Spyro's place in the hallways of gaming history. Spyro the Dragon wouldn't be the only game to make headway within this genre, as we would also see other interesting characters with the likes of Gex that would see a multitude of different sequels, along with the very popular Croc, Legend of the Gobos, that originally released in 1997, and it did present a sequel later on, but the game has since been brought back to life, with the original game's designers, Argonaut Games, currently working on a full remaster of the game, with new and improved graphics and visuals. So it proves that a lot of these interesting titles do stand the test of time. The fact that they're being brought back into the modern day on newer systems only proves this. Like RPG games, PlayStation has no shortage of platformer games that do range in quality, but there is something there for everybody. These pioneering games, along with many others, collectively refined the platforming genre on the PlayStation, as they demonstrated the rich potential of 3D graphics and immersive experiences that would be built through intricate level design and engaging narratives. The characters that emerged from this era with Crash, Spyro, Gex and Croc, among others, became more than just digital avatars, as they became beloved icons, each with unique personality and a special place in gaming history. The legacy of these games is evident that the enduring popularity and influence have stuck around on subsequent generations, also laying the groundwork for future innovations that would inspire countless developers to push the boundaries of what was possible within video games. All of these elements combined would be cherished for decades to come. Since its release in the mid-90s, the Sony PlayStation has been a fertile ground for innovation across a multitude of game genres. Its influence spans even further through the action-adventure, puzzle, simulation, strategy and multiplayer gaming sectors that have been enriched by titles that brought fresh ideas and immersive experiences to players. All we have to do is look at games like the Tomb Raider series that expanded on action-adventure elements that had not been seen during that time, but to also bring about the first true female protagonist to be the main central focal point of the game, that would change the direction of other games that came before it, but also added much creative appeal to action-adventure games from that point on. Tomb Raider, like many of the other games that have been mentioned here, is also amongst the sea of titles that have gone through the transition onto modern systems with recent remasters, as these games are so iconic that they hold so much ground in terms of their presence, that they are just as popular and playable today as they've ever been, and it's easy to see why these remakes exist. But Tomb Raider wouldn't be the only successful franchise on the PlayStation, as we also had very unique outings and interesting ideas, even with stealth games, but one of the first to make an appearance and impact would be Tenchu Stealth Assassins, releasing in late 1998, and would be followed up quite shortly with quite possibly the most iconic game seen on the PlayStation, with Metal Gear Solid, that introduces the world of espionage through the eyes of Solid Snake from the creative mind of Hideo Kojima, that changed the landscape of video games, presenting one of the most impressive and engaging cinematic gaming experiences ever conceived, showcasing intelligent gameplay through stealth and action while presenting vivid storytelling and some of the best acting ever witnessed in a video game of the time, inspiring the landscape of future development of games moving forward. This game would become a landmark in cinematic gaming, blending stealth mechanics and engaging narratives and memorable characters into a cohesive experience that it felt like an interactive movie. Its complex plot, voice acting and dramatic cutscenes set the new standards for storytelling in video games. While the Metal Gear series originally began on earlier systems with the original Nintendo, it was this outing on the PlayStation that would solidify its dominance as one of the greatest games ever made, which only enhanced the overall popularity of Sony's console, adding to the sheer volume of impressive titles already available, creating one of the most diverse catalogues ever seen in the video games industry. Following on the success of Metal Gear Solid, we would also get the Siphon Filter series that originally started off in 1999, that would see you take on the role of Gabriel Logan on a mission to stop a deadly virus from spreading across the globe, to later find out through its following sequels that you were being used as a pawn by your superiors, where you became the target for elimination. The game series also presents some of the best action-adventure gameplay and stealth elements seen on the PlayStation, which took much of its inspiration from games like Metal Gear Solid, Tenchu and Tomb Raider to create one of the best cinematic espionage experiences on the console. There would be many other genres that would reach heights of success on the PlayStation, with puzzle and rhythm, simulation, strategy, multiplayer and sports, with many notable titles that just stood out among its peers, and some of them in which we will outline here will discuss that in more detail, with Parappa the Rapper, which introduced the world to rhythm-based gameplay with its charming paper-thin characters and catchy rap tunes. Players would follow Parappa's journey to win the heart of Sonny Funny by pressing buttons in timely manners with the music, a simple yet engaging mechanic that laid the groundwork for future rhythm games. Vib Ribbon, released in 1999, took a more abstract approach, turning any music CD into a playable level. Its minimalist vector graphics and intuitive controls provided a fresh and impersonal experience, transforming players' music libraries into endless gameplay possibilities. And like all of these other elements, we would also see thriving themes among the simulation and strategy game sections, with titles like Theme Hospital and Premier Manager 98 offering in-depth management experiences, with Theme Hospital tasking players with building and managing a hospital while balancing financial and medical priorities with humour and charm. Premier Manager 98 provided a comprehensive football management experience where players could manage teams, handle transfers and navigate the intricacies of running a football club. The strategy genre found a strong foothold with the Command & Conquer series, that would be seen as a groundbreaking real-time strategy series for its time, that brought the genre to many consoles, offering intense tactical gameplay and gripping storyline, with players commanding armies, constructing bases and engaging in strategic warfare, laying the foundations for future RTS games on consoles. Multiplayer gaming on the PlayStation was also significantly advanced by titles like Quake 2 and International Track and Field. Quake 2 brought fast-paced first-person shooter action to the PlayStation, being a port of the PC edition, complete with split-screen multiplayer that allowed friends to compete head-to-head, with International Track and Field also providing a simple yet addictive button-mashing gameplay experience that turned Olympic sports into a party game phenomenon, fostering the competitive spirit among players. There would be many other examples, along with even other first-person shooters, that contributed to display innovative experiences. That, for me, one of the best examples would come in the form of Exhumed, releasing in 1996, also known as Power Slave in the US, that also mixed first-person shooting with platforming and exploration, set in an ancient Egyptian world. Its non-linear level design elements provided a unique experience that stood out from other FPS genres, and in many ways also set the blueprint for a lot of other games that followed. The PlayStation's vast library was expansive, beyond what we can imagine, which also included other innovative titles like Bushido Blade in 1997, a fighting game that removed health bars in favour of realistic sword combat, where a single strike could prove to be fatal. It introduced a level of strategy and tension uncommon in the genre, and there has nothing else been seen really like it since then. It is definitely a hidden gem on the PlayStation. Like the Sega Saturn, fighting games were also plentiful on the PlayStation, with excellent arcade ports and original concepts, reaching great success, spawning popular sequels and franchises, mostly from their introduction on the console with the Tekken series, with future entries also of the Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter series, among with other interesting and original games with Soul Blade, Dead or Alive, along with a whole batch of 2D and 3D fighters that would only get a release in Japan, but would also see a multitude of popular wrestling titles from TV franchises of the time, with WWE, WCW, ECW, among others, providing a vast mix of titles to appeal to all types of players. The PlayStation would also play a pivotal role in popularising flight combat simulation games, anything from futuristic space, rail shooter genres to open world environments that brought thrilling aerial and cosmic battles to the forefront of gaming. These games not only provided adrenaline pumping action but also immersed cinematic experiences that captivated players. And among these titles, games like the Air Combat series, G-Police, Colony Wars, Jupiter Strike, The Hive, Galaxian 3 and Starblade Alpha, among many others, would also prove that the PlayStation could present mesmerizing cinematic experiences within the comfort of your own home. The cinematic quality of these games was a defining feature, with many incorporating full motion video sequences, dramatic cutscenes and orchestral soundtracks to enhance the storytelling. These games not only provided exhilarating gameplay, but also pushed the envelope in terms of its presentation and immersive storytelling. These genres showcased the PlayStation's capabilities and left a lasting impact on the gaming landscape that would also set the stage for future innovations in interactive entertainment. These innovative games not only showcased the PlayStation's technical capabilities, but also its ability to cater to a diverse audience. The platform encouraged creativity and risk-taking, leading to the birth of new genres and the evolution of existing ones. Titles like Parappa the Rapper, Command & Conquer and Metal Gear Solid, along with the many other genres with flight simulation and survival horror, didn't just entertain, they redefined what games could be, influencing countless future titles across all platforms. The PlayStation was a crucible for innovation, fostering the development of new ideas across various genres. Its extensive library of groundbreaking games not only pushed the boundaries of what was possible, but it left such a lasting impact that still continues to inspire and impress even to this very day. The lasting legacy of the PlayStation. Since its launch in December of 1994, the PlayStation has left an indelible mark on the gaming industry, reshaping the landscape of innovative and interactive entertainment. Over the last 30 years, the PlayStation has not only introduced revolutionary technology in game design, but has also fostered a rich legacy that continues to captivate players around the world. The original PlayStation broke new grounds with its use of CD-ROMs, offering greater storage capacity compared to the cartridges of previous consoles. This allowed for more complex games with richer graphics, expansive soundtracks, and full-motion videos, revolutionizing how stories were told in games. Titles like Final Fantasy VII with its deep narrative and cinematic presentation showcased the potential of this new medium, leaving a profound impact on players and setting a new standard for the future of RPG games. One of the most significant contributions of the PlayStation was the birth of the 3D platformer. Games like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon transformed how players interacted with game worlds, offering a sense of depth and immersion previously unseen. These characters became icons and are still enjoyed through remasters and sequels, demonstrating the lasting appeal of the original design and storytelling. The PlayStation's influence extended beyond platformers, however. The console became a breeding ground for innovative gameplay in diverse genres, with Metal Gear Solid introducing players to stealth action and complex narratives, while Resident Evil gave birth to the survival horror genre, leaving players both terrified and thrilled all at the same time. These games not only pushed the boundaries of what was technically possible, but also explored new ways to engage players emotionally and intellectually. Multiplayer gaming also saw a significant evolution with PlayStation, with titles like Twisted Metal and Tekken, bringing competitive gaming into the living rooms, fostering a culture of social play that paved the way for the online multiplayer experiences we see today. This emphasis on community and shared experiences became a cornerstone of the PlayStation's popularity. As technology advanced, the PlayStation brand evolved, with each subsequent console, with the PlayStation 2, 3, 4 and now 5, building on the legacy of its predecessor. The PlayStation 2 became the best-selling console of all time, thanks to its vast library of games and backward compatibility. The PlayStation 3 introduced Blu-ray technology and online gaming to the brand, while the PlayStation 4 refined the user experience with powerful hardware and an intuitive interface. The PlayStation 5 continues this tradition, offering cutting-edge graphics, lightning-fast load times and a growing catalogue of critically acclaimed games. Even as new generations of consoles that emerge, the impact of the original and its successors remains palpable. The nostalgia for classic titles fuels a thriving market for remakes and remasters, allowing new players to experience the magic of games that came before it. This ongoing reverence of the PlayStation's history is a testament to the console's lasting legacy. And in conclusion, PlayStation's journey over the past 30 years has been marked only by innovation, with iconic games and a profound influence on the gaming industry. From its pioneering use of CD-ROMs to the creation of beloved franchises, the PlayStation has constantly pushed the boundaries of what games can be. As it continues to evolve with newer technology, the original PlayStation's legacy endures, captivating new generations of gamers while honouring the achievements of its past. But this isn't the end of the journey, as the PlayStation is home to many legendary games and entries that have greatly entertained players over the years, with so many more that few of us know know anything about that we have yet to discover. So we will continue to venture further in this next video to explore more of the vast and impressive gaming history of the iconic Sony PlayStation. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.